Okay, by the
Hello, everyone. On behalf of Global Nomads Group, I'm so excited to be joining you live from New York, the United States, for the Global Nomads Group's host program, Don't Trash the Earth. I'm Rachel from New York. Participating schools mute their microphones if they're not already, and just mute the microphone on the computer until we're ready to go. So we have 3 middle schools joining us from the United States today, and we're so excited to have you with us. Let's hear from a representative from each school. If you could introduce yourself, tell us your school and location, and something you're excited about talking about today. So let's hear from Harris Middle School first from an introduction. When they're done, we'll hear from the Capital School, and then if George Washington Carver is ready for an introduction as well. A reminder to say thank you when you're complete so we know that we can move on to the next school. So let's hear from Harris Middle School.
Hi, my name is Dallas, president of the green team here at Harris Middle School located in San Antonio, Texas. I'm very excited to be able to be in this call. Thank you.
I asked them to read.
Hello, we are the Beard Sphere cluster at the Capital School. We're in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We're 9 through 12-year-olds, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. Roll Tide! Doobie doobie!
Thank you at the Capital School and at Harris Middle School. Great to have you with us. At George Washington Carver, are you ready for an introduction? We'd love to hear from you with your school name, location, and something you're excited about talking with us today. Thanks. Okay, when George Washington Carver is ready, we'll have them introduce themselves as well. But for now, we're so happy to have the Capital School here. Oh, and there's George Washington Carver. Go ahead.
We're ready.
And see if you have the card for room 16.
Hello, my name is Christopher. We are from Carver Elementary School in Compton, California. One interesting thing we learned from wasted was realizing how much paper we actually waste.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christopher. It's great to have you and all your classmates here. We're so excited to talk to all of you today. So now I'd like to turn to my, my friend and guest speaker who's next to me, Thad. We're so pleased to have you with us today, and would love to hear from you a brief introduction.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to be the guest. So my name is Thad Copeland, and I wanted to share a little bit about my interest in this. And like so many of you, when I was in 5th and 6th grade, I started the very first environmental club at my school. And it was from those early experiences that I first learned a lot about the importance of recycling and energy conservation. And later, as an older teenager, I was able to travel some in the world. And it was those experiences where I first began to witness the effects of our consumerism on the natural world, such as through seeing natural landscapes that have been polluted and things like that. So those two things sort of informed my decisions as to what I wanted to study in college, which was sustainability. And fast forward a few years after that, and I'm now working in New York City for a fantastic environmental organization, a nonprofit called GrowNYC. It's about 40 years old. And we do a lot of things in the city related to gardening and recycling and environmental education. And with that, my program specifically is called Recycling Champions. And the work there is to sort of work in New York City schools and to sort of create effective recycling programs in schools based on educating students about changing their habits and thinking differently about what we throw away, and sort of changing the perspective on that and looking at things that we might normally consider trash, but how that could be considered a treasure. And part of that, of course, is also composting and looking at ways of reusing materials too. So that's sort of the background in New York City with my work. I could share a little specifically about schools, if you would like.
Yeah, maybe we could see that pie chart.
Sure.
And see the,
so one thing that's interesting about New York City, and it's probably similar for your schools too, the Department of Sanitation in New York City did a waste audit, sort of similar to what you all did in your classroom, looking at what exactly is thrown away in schools and how much of that could be recycled or composted. So the green sphere is 40%, and that's showing us paper and cardboard. The other largest waste amount is food scraps, another 40%. And then you see the blue triangle at the bottom, 10% of that, metal, glass, milk cartons, or juice boxes, and plastics. So that leaves us with just 10% of what a school generates as far as being something that's not recyclable or composted that would actually be sent to a landfill. So knowing that information and knowing, for those of you that don't know, New York City has 1,800 schools and 1.1 million students just in the New York City school system. So you can imagine the large amount of waste created in schools and the importance to get students to recycle properly at school, but also to go home and teach their parents how to do it.
Thank you so much, Thad. We'd love to hear from all of you. Our students that are watching, please be sure to type your name and location in the Q&A chat box if you're watching this on Google+. We'd love to hear from you, your questions to Thad, as well as to our other schools that are participating here. George Washington Carver, Harris Middle School, and the Capitol School. So Thad just told us why he got involved in waste management and dealing with sustainability. And I'd love to hear from you. What role does or should youth play in your community or school? Why don't we go to the Capitol School to hear first? How do you think youth should or could get involved in your school moving forward? We'll go to the Capitol School, then hear from maybe George Washington Carver, and then Harris Middle School. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, in our project about about the trash things, the most things we found was compost and landfill, and we asked for permission from the principal of our school if we can get a recycling bin and composting bin, and we were gonna do a movie for the whole school telling the parents and teachers what to do and what to bring to school, what kind of trash and like what kind of packages and things you're allowed to school and what you're not allowed to bring to school, so we can reduce the trash. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's great.
Yeah. At Harris Middle School, I know you're also working on composting. Could you maybe add on to what they said about what they found in their waste audit, that most of it was could be composted, and what they hope to do at their school?
Yeah, we have a daily compost schedule where our team members go to the cafeteria and take the compost to the garden to our compost bins. We will put the compost and the fruits and veggies into either our traditional compost or our worm compost bins. Thank you.
Great. And I know also, George Washington Carver, you have been interested in composting. Let's hear a bit about that, and then maybe Thad can tell us some of the work he's done
Sure.
Here in New York. George Washington Carver, could you tell us a bit about your plans to be involved in waste reduction in your school?
Right. Yeah. Come on, read.
My name is Sage. Minefield talked about we cannot use meat, so if we cannot use meat, what happens to all the meat that becomes trash?
Oh, that's a great question, Sage. Let's hear from Thad.
The question is, what happens to meat since it can't be composted?
Yes. Yes.
Correct? Okay. So that is a fantastic question. One thing, if more than likely that's being sent to a landfill. And a lot of people, what they don't realize is that when our food scraps, meat or otherwise, are sent to landfills and they begin to decompose, they release a methane gas. And methane gas is actually the most toxic greenhouse gas. So it's one of the largest man-made contributors to climate change. So it's an important connection to make between our food scraps that we throw away and what can be composted or recycled. In New York City, they have a commercial collection program for food scraps, and so they actually do collect meats in the New York City schools. They're not composting it on site at the school like you all are, though. It's going to a facility and it's being composted commercially. So there's a little bit of difference there, but I think it's still important to recognize, even if you can't compost the meats, that by composting your other items, such as your fruits and vegetables and breads, it still makes a huge difference. Thank you.
Thank you. As we're on the topic of composting, I'd love to hear what some successes or challenges have been now that you've identified compost as a big part of the waste stream in your school. Why don't we go back to Harris Middle School and hear a bit more about if you plan to, compost meats, let's say, or where you plan to process that compost. Will it be on site at your school? And here, Thad, can you describe the picture we're looking at?
Sure. So this is in a New York City school. This is looking at a middle school and how the students there collect items to put in the compost bin. You can see a custom sign that the students made to remind their classmates. And also, some of the schools in New York City now have trays that are not styrofoam but made out of a paper pulp material that's 100% compostable. So in schools that have that, it makes it easy. They can just put that directly into the bin with the food scraps.
Great. So what about at your school? What might you be able to compost at your school? Let's hear from Harris Middle School, then George Washington Carver, and then the Capitol School. What can you compost at your school? Are your trays compostable? Let's hear about the future of composting with you. Thank you.
Okay, well, at our school, the challenges we faced was at the beginning of the year, our administrators who walk around with a trash can collecting trash weren't collecting compost as we did last year, so we had to reset up that schedule. And so with now our schedule being set up, and we plan on keeping this constant for the future and continuing to collect compost. Thank you.
Okay, and let's hear at George Washington Carver. Do you have materials that are already being composted? Where do you hope to compost materials? And I want to continue with our conversation like this as a dialogue. So you can all jump in after the last school says thank you, and you can continue with your comments or questions. So let's hear from George Washington Carver about their experiences with composting in their school and how you might do that in the future. Thanks.
Well, Well, some of the things that we can compost at our school is we can separate bins, like we can have liquids and we can have liquid food, and we can also have milk cartons. And what we can put inside is like banana peels, avocado peels, and orange peels. Thank you. Thank you.
Teacher, for the interruption, is everybody was at 8:30. 8:30, we go outside, take it.
Let's hear from the Capitol School. Let's give them a second.
Can you hear us?
Go ahead.
Okay, just 1 second. Our speaker's coming.
Some of the things that we can compost are banana peels, orange peels, avocado shells, and how we can do that is we can separate the bins as like to put milk cartons in one, liquids in one, and food. That's what we're trying to do.
That's really great at George Washington Carver. It sounds like you all, both schools we've heard from so far, know a lot about composting. Let's hear from the Capitol School. Are you currently doing a composting program at your school? Are there any challenges that you face? Go ahead.
Well, we haven't started composting yet, but we will this month. And when we do, we don't have a garden here, so we're going to send the soil to people who do have gardens for them to use.
And one of our problems is that we have babies all the way up to 12th grade, so we have to get
And one of our problems is we have babies to 12th grade, so we have to figure out a way to do it.
Get everybody to want to do it.
To get everybody to want to do it.
Yeah.
That's my deal. Thank you. So I wanted to share a few ideas because a lot of what my work is in schools is obviously working with students and green teams or science clubs that are interested in this, in addition to educating the faculty. But I've seen a lot of creative student projects about this, and I thought maybe I could share some ideas that could be useful. One being the importance of having good signage in the cafeteria. So when students are finished eating, they know where to put their food scraps or where to put the recyclables. This was made by Columbia Secondary School in Manhattan. And I thought it was an excellent example, all student made. They put real life items on the sign, so it's perfectly clear about how to sort the materials and which ones go in which category. So that's an easy thing that I would encourage you all to do. And you can pair this with having you all or recruit classmates to be sort of student monitors to stand by the bins and make sure that students are reminded about what goes in each bin. So that's very important.
I love also that picture not only showed what could be composted, but also it was signs for what goes in the landfill and what is metal and can be recycled. So it's all of the waste management all together.
Yes.
And anything else?
Sure. So 2 or 3 other examples of student activities. And, you know, it's so important with this, especially when you're trying to persuade someone to adopt a new habit or to do something differently, is to try to make it fun and engaging. And one thing, I've heard the Capitol School mention this, is they want to make a video, which I think is a fantastic. Maybe you could show that in an assembly or something. But there are other things you can do in the cafeteria while students are eating lunch. And the first one is a student survey. I call it an IDOT survey. You have a picture here coming up on the screen. And what this is you draw a giant eye in the middle, and then you have all these thought balloons coming off of it. And inside each one of those balloons, you write things that you want to know about, like, do you recycle at home? Or do you reuse reusable water bottle, things like that that you want to sort of measure environmental awareness about. And then if a student does that or they agree with that statement, then they put a dot in that circle. And in this case, we use different color dots for each grade or each class so we could determine at the end of the day which grade or class had the most participation. So that's one example. Another example, super simple, is just to make a pledge wall. And this is great if you're kicking this off for the first time, or maybe it's been going and you want to get more attention around it. This is half of the pledge wall, but it basically says, I pledge to make a difference in the earth by ... And then students below it can write whatever they want or however they will go forward and try to make a positive difference in the environment. And then the last one is, of course, games are always fun, or competitions. And I have a picture here of, it's basically a recycling hoop game, a hoop challenge. Can we get that up on the screen? Oh, well, we can talk about this. Is that better, Louis? Okay, so we'll go back to that. This is showing a middle school robotics team, and it is a, they created a device. This is the lid of a recycling bin, but it's flipped upside down so you can see the lid. But every time a milk carton was inserted into the recycling bin, it counted the milk carton, and it also made a moo noise because it's a milk carton, which I thought was very clever and a great way to involve a student club into this.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I could imagine putting as many milk cartons as I could in there to hear the moo noise.
Yeah, dude, I don't know. There was a picture of the whole thing. I don't know if you can find that. Well, we can talk about this. So this is what I was alluding to a minute ago. You can see the girl in the turquoise, and there's a girl next to her in a black shirt tossing an item. Her arm's sort of blurry, but you see the two blue recycling bins on the back of the wall. Those are blue bins in New York City. We recycle blue bins, and so the idea is to sort of make a fun competition of getting the milk carton into the right bin, just to sort of raise awareness and connect to remind people about which bin that item goes into.
Thank you so much, Thad. As Thad mentioned, how we recycle is different in every community. So I'd like to hear from you. Is waste an issue in your community, and how is it currently dealt with at your school? I heard that you found out that paper was a big issue. Are there maybe paper recycling bins, or is this not something that is dealt with currently in your school? So let's hear from, let's see, the Capitol School, and then Harris Middle School, and then George Washington Carver. We can just go down the line. And hear about how waste is already dealt with in your school. Is there carnivals? Are you recycling? And is it an issue? Thank you so much.
Tuscaloosa doesn't do that much recycling, but we're trying to do some recycling.
Talk about a paper monitor in class that we started, making sure we use both sides of the recycling bin.
Yes. For paper, because some people just do one side, throw it away, we're trying to do both sides to not waste paper.
Harris, we hear you. Go ahead.
Here at Harris, we have many recycling bins scattered throughout the school. So every Friday we have clubs that go around and collect the paper that are in the recycling bins. Thank you.
And George Washington Carver, whenever you're ready.
Okay. So what do we? Our project. We're trying to help the community recycle more bottles, milk cartons, and cardboard.
We don't do it in school. We don't do it in school.
We don't do it in school either.
So we're gonna try.
So we're gonna try.
And give bins to the classroom. They give bins to the classroom so they can recycle the bottles that are outside on the ground. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And why don't you stay seated, the boy who was just up front at George Washington Carter. That's very interesting to me that your school doesn't currently recycle. And I'd love to hear why you think it is important to recycle at your school.
It is important because global warming is bad for the earth. And trying to get rid of waste and throw a lot of paper from not throwing a lot of paper away. Because that's saving, we need to save trees. That's it.
Thank you so much. That was great. Why don't we go back to the Capitol School and hear why, you know, if you have anything to add about why it's so important to recycle at school. And then we'll hear if you have any questions for Thad here. So go ahead, thanks.
Why recycling is important? I'm going to ask a question for that. About Tuscaloosa.
Recycling is important because it helps waste in the country. It helps reduce waste.
Is that it? Okay, who has a question? Who has a question for that? Bethany, come up. About reusing things? Yeah. Go ahead.
I want to ask if you guys reuse some of your things. Like if you reuse the soup cans and you put like toothbrushes in it or something. Or Ziploc bags to reuse them.
That's a fantastic question. And, you know, I think reuse is something that's very important, but it's something that we do less of. It seems people seem to understand more about recycling than reusing, but reusing is actually just as important and sometimes easier. One of the things I like about reusing is that it can be creative, because we can find lots of creative ways to use things that were once something that we had no need for. You just mentioned something about using a can to be like a toothbrush holder or a pencil holder. That's a fantastic idea. I've worked with some schools that have collected large water bottles and have turned those into planters for their gardens or made bird feeders out of those. It's another reuse project. And something else that comes to mind is some schools have made a fashion show out of reusable items that they could wear, and they called it a trashin' show, if you get that, trashin' show. So again, it was sort of in a student assembly, but it was all featuring this idea about what are things that we would normally throw away, or because these are usually items too that can't be recycled or normally are not recycled, but are repurposed and given a new life. So again, I would encourage all the schools to maybe explore that, and a lot of art classes also do projects with this, like making murals out of bottle caps. It's another example of something I've seen. So again, there's a lot of potential.
Yeah, and I think that reusing is something that we can all be responsible of for ourselves. Even if recycling isn't a big part of our school culture already, we can certainly wash out those soup cans, as you mentioned, and come up with creative ideas to reuse things. Let's hear from Harris Middle School. Do you do any reusing, either on an individual basis or in school, that you'd like to share about? And then if you have a question for Thad or our other schools, please go ahead.
Well, in our schools, sometimes, like in art projects, I know last year they did a project where they would reuse stuff to make like 3D art. And this year we're actually going to be using like carton from toilet paper to plant seeds for our garden. Thank you.
Yeah, I think.
Does anyone have a specific question for me? I loved what you just shared about reusing milk cartons to grow seedlings that could be planted in a garden. That's a fantastic idea. Any specific questions? If not, I'd like to talk to the school at George Washington Carver School about, you said there's currently not any recycling going on in your building, and I was just curious if you've tried to start that or to address it with maybe your principal, or if you've gone to meet with your custodian about that need, or if there are any things that you've done to try to maybe raise awareness about the issue, and to try, even if you could just start small and maybe have a recycling bin in just like one grade classrooms, or like all the 6th grades have the recycling bin just for 1 year and sort of grow it year after year. Was just curious about any steps that have been done or any ideas you might have tried.
We don't have recycling yet, but we want to create a slideshow, do an assembly, and to ask our principal if we can do that. And we want to make boxes out of cardboard and give them to all the classes and do a decorating contest to get them motivated. Thank you.
That's fantastic. I like that you have some steps that you've thought about. And you mentioned something about making bins out of cardboard boxes, I think, and that is a fantastic thing I've seen used in other schools. A lot of schools have empty boxes that their copy paper comes in. Again, this is a great way to reuse the box. You can just put the lid on it, maybe cut a slot in the top of it so you can put the scrap paper in there for recycling. And it's also a way you could have a competition. You could ask each classroom to decorate their recycling box a certain way, and then maybe have different people from the green team or teachers go around and judge to see which one was the most creative. Good work.
And I wonder if some of the other schools that are participating have any suggestions for George Washington Carver as they start their recycling program, which is so exciting that you are going to be the ones to start this program at your school. So let's hear from the Capital School. Do you have any suggestions for them as they move forward from this? And then we'll hear from Harris Middle School. Thanks. Okay, we're going to move on, I believe, to Harris Middle School until Capital Middle School can join us once again. So tell us a bit about
we created a job for somebody who patrols each trash bin for recyclable materials, and when you put your trash in the garbage, you have to make sure it's recyclable, so you don't put composting in the recycling bin.
Can I say something? Yeah. Thank you so much. So you're saying that you kind of act like a patroller or a police person to make sure that the appropriate recyclable materials or compostable materials go in the right bin. Is that what you were saying at the Capital School? And also, is this a job that you do, or is this a job for other people at your school? Tell us a bit more about it before we hear suggestions from Harris.
For recycling bins.
One person in our class every week is responsible for the recycling bins to go around the school and gather up compostable things and recyclable things that we have, so that we can reduce our landfill that we just throw away.
But we're a small school.
But we're a small school and we only have 200 kids.
great. And any suggestions from Harris Middle School as well? Thanks.
Well, our administrators, they came to the class last week and came around and talked about the importance of putting the right things in recycling bins so that way they don't have any problems at the recycling plant. So they came around and they notified us, and so they encouraged people to start recycling more. And we also have a question real quick. So, what do you use your compost for? In the
You can ask them to repeat it as well.
Okay, I'm sorry, Harris. Could you please repeat the question? I think it was, what do we use the compost for? But I want to be sure I'm correct.
Okay, so he asked, in New York, when you like compost your fruits and vegetables, what do you use it for? Like, do you put it on plants or?
Okay, yeah, great question. So, there are actually two things. If a school is collecting the compost to be used on site at the school, so in other words, they have a compost bin maybe in the back of the school, they're using that to be put onto flower beds or their school garden. So it's a great natural fertilizer. The other thing is, if the school is participating in the city compost program, meaning that the food scraps are picked up by the city and taken to another facility, then two things are happening with it. One is it's being, again, used to make compost that's used throughout the city to go like to city parks. Obviously everyone knows Central Park, but there are lots of parks in New York City where the compost is used, and the gardens. Or the city's experimenting, and it's very cool. They've created a facility in Brooklyn where they're actually creating electricity from food scraps. Because when our food decomposes, as I said earlier, it releases gases, and one of those gases is methane gas. So they're able to capture that and then burn that and put it into the form of electricity. So a lot of students are pretty perplexed or find it really awesome to think about, wow, I could be like charging my computer or my cell phone from a piece of pizza I threw away last month. So it's a new technology, but it's something that's really exciting and something that's really going to change the way the city operates.
Thank you, Thad. I'm sure we have some more questions from our audience, and then we'll take some. We'll continue taking questions. So let's hear from George Washington Carver. Do you have any questions for Thad?
Some cities banned plastic bags here. Was that done where you are? Thank you.
Did that happen where you are? So maybe if you could answer and then prompt the other students.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure California has, right, banned the plastic bags. That's fantastic, because a lot of people think about the plastic bag as being something that is harmless, but we've seen time and time again how those especially get washed into rivers and oceans and not only pollute those but kill a lot of animals. So it's something that has been proposed here in New York City. It hasn't happened yet. I'm hoping it will. It's a fantastic point, and I'm not sure about our other schools in Alabama and Texas what the rules are there. I'd like to hear that.
Maybe if we could start in Texas, if you could tell us about, if there are any rules or policies about plastic bags or anything else in the cities by you to regulate this on the citywide level, like they have in George Washington Carver City in Compton, California. Thanks.
Hi, this is Ms. Wimwing, and I'm actually going to answer that for our students. We have, there's definitely laws, and we have to follow those, and we've had to overcome quite a few obstacles to be able to even compost, and there are regulations that you have to follow for sure, and then we look at those. So I wanted to kind of save you for that question.
Okay, thanks. And what about at in the capital school in Alabama? Are there any regulations on the or things that why don't we go ahead? It looks like you're all ready.
In Tuscaloosa, we're still allowed to have plastic bags, and in Alabama, we're not very good at recycling. We would like to talk to Thad about his help and what we could do.
And maybe first, if you could give us a little more context, what do you mean Alabama's not good at recycling? It sounds like you all are in your school. How do you know that Alabama is not good in recycling? And what specific, help would you like from Thad? Go ahead.
But what we mean by Alabama's not that good about recycling is you could usually we have bunch of food left over from schools. Pizza boxes are thrown away. There's not a lot of environmental stuff going on, especially in Tuscaloosa. A lot of factories are making new stuff, so you have a lot of air pollution, also not with compostable things and recyclable things.
Okay. This is an important question. What we're doing at school is ultimately a community. Should I continue talking? Okay. And I think you raise a good point in this. This is sort of like the end game here is how can we change the habits of society around this? And, it's not something that is easy to do, and it's not something that will happen quickly. But I think the fact that this discussion is happening is a solid first step, because it's important to connect to other communities around the country on this topic to see what they're doing. But there are a lot of local things you can do beyond school. One is you could host an event at your school, maybe for your parents and grandparents to come to, invite maybe city council members to come to, or elected officials. A lot of elected officials like to get press with events happening at school. So that's something you could use, and it could maybe have like an environmental fair or something where you all are presenting to the community about maybe showing the video you want to make about this or why it's important. Another thing that you could do is to create a petition and get signatures. That's another way that you could persuade people to change their mind about this. But, as students, I think it's very hard or it's difficult for elected officials to ignore that voice, because we are the future, you're the future, and you're soon going to vote one day. But what you do now makes a big difference. And so I would urge you to think about how can you get maybe someone from the city to attend one of your meetings. But at the very least, if you can't do that, start with your parents and grandparents and start with changing those habits. And maybe think about making some flyers to put in the community about recycling, or putting something in the local newspaper even. Just small steps that will eventually sort of change the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Thad. I know at Harris Middle School you have your green team or your environmental team present today, and we have the president there. And why don't you tell us any ways that you may have gotten your community involved, or are you specifically looking to just increase environmental awareness and sustainability at school? What do you do in your team? Thanks.
Okay, well, here at Harris in the green team, we also have a garden, and so we grow multiple fruits and vegetables, and we have lots of flowers. So over the summer or over the long breaks, lots of weeds usually come up and problems. So with our community, we have these things called garden cleanups. So they come out and they help us clean up the garden and get all the weeds out with us. And it makes them aware because they realize how fun helping outside with the garden can be. Thank you.
That's great. What about at George Washington Carver? Do you have other questions for Thad or for our other schools? And also, if you have any other ways that your city is being efficient, like you mentioned with those plastic bags? We'd love to hear.
What motivated you to get into waste reduction?
Okay, good question. So what motivated me to get into waste reduction? Honestly, some of it was how I was raised as a child, to be sort of resourceful and to take care of things that were given to me. And I became, as an adult, very frustrated with our society, seeing how wasteful people were with what they were throwing away, things perfectly good that could have been saved to use for something else, or should have been recycled, that were put into the trash can. So it was basically an interest in that, and a desire to sort of change the conversation and to educate people about that in our society, because we, as you all know, consume a lot in the society, and a lot of what we consume is made to be used 1 or 2 times and then thrown away. And I think it's important, as our population of our world grows and our country grows, that we think about these resources and how we're using them, and try to use them in a more responsible and conservative way.
And we have just a few minutes left here, but I'd love to hear from our other schools. What is motivating you to take part in this program, and what is motivating you to patrol, your recycle bins, and to lead these green teams? Because as Thad mentioned before, we're here because we think that you as students can make the biggest change in your schools and communities, and then the world. But let's hear, what you think about that. So why don't we go to the Capital School first, and then if they also have any questions, they can go ahead. Thanks.
We want to recycle because then, like, global warming, it'll reduce that, and then there won't be as much waste filling up stuff. Instead, we can just use it again instead of having it just sit there to do nothing.
Good.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Why don't we hear from Harris Middle School about what inspired them to be in their green team, and then if they have any questions for Thad or for the other schools participating.
Hello. What inspired me to be a part of the green team is that I just loved being able to be in the garden and compost and know that I'm actually helping my community, and seeing that I'm making an impact for the future and making the world even a little better, even if not much. And I also had a question about how do you get your composting done while it's snowing? Thank you.
Could you repeat your question and maybe move your microphone down a tiny bit? And I heard something about compost and snow, but go ahead.
My question was, how do you get your composting done while it's snowing?
Oh, okay. So how do we get things to be composted if it's frozen and it's snowing? Great question. Clearly, it makes things more difficult if it's frozen, because something can't really decompose if it's frozen. So it definitely slows the process down here in the winter. Especially for composters that are doing this at schools, or maybe if they have a backyard and trying to do it at home. One thing you can do, though, is you could bring it inside by creating a worm bin in your classroom. You can't compost on as big a scale as you would in a backyard composter bin or something, but it's still another way that you could keep the process alive and moving forward. And it's fascinating to watch these worms and how quickly they eat these food scraps and process them into compost. So that's one way it happens.
And I know at Harris Middle School, I think your teacher told me that you might have a worm bin in your room. Could you tell us a bit about that? And then I think we'll have one last question from each school. But first, let's hear from Harris Middle School about the worm bin that you may have in your classroom. Thanks.
Yeah, we do have a worm bin in our classroom that we started a few days ago, last week I believe, and we already started putting paper, and we put the red wiggler worms in there, and we put lettuce leaves in, and it's sitting in the classroom, so it does, because it's a little too cold outside, and we already have a little bit of worm tea.
That's awesome. I have had a worm bin before personally, and I think it's so cool. And it's great to have that in your class. Like you said, it's fine to have inside because it doesn't usually smell. And it's a great way to do composting or waste reduction on a smaller scale. So just some of the snacks that you know, might be accumulated in your classroom, or some of that paper. But that is so cool that you have it in school. And I hope that maybe some other schools that are watching today will get inspired to do that at home or in school, because it's also fun to have worms as pets. But I believe we just have a few minutes left. So if we could have maybe a final question from George Washington Carver, and we'll go through to each school for final questions. And then before we sign off, I'm going to ask each of you to tell us one thing that you plan to do at your school moving forward based on this conversation. Let's move to George Washington Carver.
One question that I have is composting necessarily the healthiest way to get rid of the waste?
Waste? Is that the question? Yes. It's for food scraps and food waste in particular, it's a natural process because decomposition is already occurring in nature when microorganisms and worms eat these food scraps. So it's very efficient in that regard, and it's really one of the only and few ways that we can process our food waste without either burning it or sending it to a landfill. So yes, it is. It's very efficient, and it's a healthy way to do that.
And one thing we haven't mentioned about, we mentioned reusing our cans, we mentioned recycling our metal and our paper, but another thing, remember, is to reduce. So in addition to composting our food scraps, you can all reduce the amount of food that you purchase or that is grown, and that's another way to, I think, deal with the food waste problem.
Yeah, fantastic point. Very, very important on reduce.
Yeah, great. Another great question from George Washington Carver. We're so happy that you joined us a bit early today. And why don't we go to the Capitol School with any final questions you have for Thad or for our other schools. Thanks.
Do you recycle like electronic devices of any kind?
Okay, good question about that. Because as technology changes quickly, obviously there are more of these items to discard. I'm not really sure about the law on this in Alabama, but in New York City, stores are required to take electronics back, especially if you have an old computer or an old cell phone or an old tablet or game box. Best Buy takes that back by law. Radio Shack takes it back by law. I feel fairly confident that those retailers in Alabama and Texas and California would also take them back. I'm not 100% on that, but I think it's required by those stores to do so. So that's one way when they take them back, then they handle them in a correct manner to be recycled or components to be reused out of it. So, and I know also Verizon takes back old cell phones. So again, that's related.
Yeah, and that's a big part of, I think, what we recycle at home are these electronics. So that's great that you guys are all thinking about that. Go ahead at the Capitol School at Harris Middle School for a final question.
Hello, this one's for Thad. How was it for you to start in this topic, and what did it take to start wanting to encourage people on this?
Could you please repeat, maybe hold the microphone back just a little? I'm sorry, I caught about half of it.
How was it for you to start in this topic, and what did it take to start wanting to encourage people?
Oh, sure. So, earlier on I addressed how my interest in this grew. A lot of it grew out of, first of all, growing up. I grew up not in New York, but in the South, and so I had access to outside and seeing nature a lot, but also traveling was a big experience that allowed me to see parts of the world that were polluted by things that we buy. And so that was a big factor in my interest with this. I'm not sure that I'm answering your question, though. Could you maybe ask the second half of it again, or repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Say your question slowly. It might help us understand.
How was it? How was it for you to start in this, and what did it take to start to want to encourage people?
Okay, thank you. So my work, I guess what you're asking about, what got me involved in that and interested, and basically I enjoy working with students and youth, and had some experience with that, and I was really wanting to get involved to make a difference where I live. I live in New York City now, and this is a big city. And I saw an opportunity to work with schools to combine my personal experience and passions with working with young people, and also caring about the environment. So those two sort of met, and this was an area that presented itself as opportunity. And it's been one of the most rewarding things I've done, to actually do something that you care about and that you can see is making a difference. And talking to you all about this has been a big bonus for me too, because I'm able to see how other communities and schools across the nation are taking up this issue, because students can and do create a lot of positive change, and you all are great examples of that. So it's been very rewarding, and I hope that this has been something that's encouraged and inspired you all to go and maybe think about new ways that you could work on this in your school.
Great. Thank you for that great question and answer, that thoughtful answer, Thad. At George Washington Carver, do you have a final question that you'd like to ask to Thad or one of our other schools? Go ahead. Thanks.
We don't have a question, but we have a plan. Our plan is to start a recycling program school-wide. Thank you.
That is fabulous.
Yes, what an ambitious goal. I'm so happy to hear that.
And we would love to have updates from your school, from all of your schools. Please send us updates, put them on the Google Plus event page so we know what you all are doing. You've been wonderful participants today. It's been great to have you with us. And on behalf of Global Nomads Group, it's just been our pleasure. So I think we'll have a quick goodbye from Thad as well. And then we're going to leave you with a rap that was created by some. You want to introduce it?
Is it the middle?
Yeah.
Yes. You're right. So one of the cool things about working with so many schools in New York City is a lot of students are doing neat things. So we have a video of a rap written by a student about recycling. I think it will be encouraging and maybe inspiring for you all to do something creative like this. And also, your instructors all have the link to my program's website. On there are a lot of resources, things you can download that are already made, templates, ideas for competitions, and so forth. So check that out to help this momentum going forward. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you all.
Yeah, it's been you are a great. We can't wait to hear about all the successes that you have at school. And let's hear this rap.
Be cool, start recycling in school. No, this ain't another rule, just the proper thing to do. You take your paper, your plastic, glass, and aluminum. Once you're done reusing them, it's all about disposing them. Make sure you separate with bags and with tags and your recyclable trash. You should always keep a tab on how much you're weighing. Ain't no delaying. Call him Dr. Eco Swag, and the earth is my patient. Nearly dying over landfills that many hands fill while they stand still. I refuse to burn a candle. It's up to me, it's up to you, it's up to us to make sure the recovery is miraculous. Plant a couple trees and start recycling, and you will be amazed about the life that a little brain's worth.
And if we could hear from all of you, if you want to unmute your microphones and say goodbye.